This is the story of an epidemic.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
In loss of life, it's like a Vietnam War every 6 months. And it costs the United States over $1 trillion a year.
Is this the way you feel in the morning? Still tired after a good night's sleep?
If anyone had ever told me a few years ago that we would ever read headlines like these in American news.
Mothers, the Council of Parents magazine commends Juvenile for your child.
Drug dealers need to know that we want them out of our schools, neighborhoods, and our lives.
And all of this death and destruction, all of these communities torn apart, all of this pain and suffering was caused by one family, the Sacklers.
The story on this family is absolutely insane.
I'm not sure that I'm aware of any family in America that's more evil than yours.
There's nothing that I can find that I would have done differently.
The damage and the pain and the grief is lifelong, and Purdue Pharma and the Sacklers need to be held accountable for what they've done.
Well, I believe I conducted myself legally and ethically, and I believe the full record will demonstrate that. I still feel absolutely terrible.
Company documents show the Sacklers pushed to drive up OxyContin sales while knowing of the drug's potential for abuse.
So to my young friends out there, life can be great, but not when you can't see it.
I hope that every face, every single victim's face haunts your every waking moment and your sleeping ones too. I hope you hear our names in your dreams. I hope you hear the screams of the families who find their loved ones overdosing on the bathroom floor.
How did it feel for them to know that they've ripped lives apart?
But this story isn't new. To tell it completely, we have to go back in time. All the way back to 1963, to the introduction of a new wonder drug called Valium.
But then there are some other, more typical post-MI patients. They may be in good shape physically, but emotionally they're too tense and apprehensive even to return to work, let alone run 26 miles. In such cases, when excessive anxiety and tension are interfering with rehabilitative efforts, Valium, diazepam, can help the transition back to work.
So, who exactly is this Sackler family?
Sure. So the Sacklers were basically three brothers from Brooklyn. They got their start, really, the eldest brother, Arthur Sackler, in medical advertising. So he was a really important pioneer in the field of medical and specifically pharmaceutical advertising. He was one of the first people ever inducted into the Medical Advertising Hall of Fame, actually. So basically, when he came on the scene in the 40s, there really wasn't much pharmaceutical advertising. There were these door-to-door salesmen. They're called detail men, and they would basically try to push their drugs on doctors. What Arthur realized is that you could use print advertising. And he was actually the first person to convince the Journal of American Medicine to insert a color brochure advertising a particular drug.
There was a long history of using doctors in ads, but this was completely different. Now they were advertising directly to the doctors.
What do doctors do for pain of headache, neuritis, neuralgia?
For my patients, I recommend the ingredients in
benzodiazepine, also known as Valium.
The benzodiazepines were first brought on the market in the early 1960s. Originally, we felt these were wonder drugs. What we discovered very soon was it was a kind of fool's gold.
They launched Valium into the marketplace, told people that it was non-addictive, non-abusive, grew the market. They were writing Valiums for headaches, Valiums for knee, shoulder, elbow pain.
Diazepam is commonly prescribed for muscle spasms and seizures. Where misused, diazepam can result in addiction, overdose, and even death.
But that didn't stop Valium from becoming the most popular prescription drug every year from 1968 to 1982.
That'll rev up the old engine, huh?
Valium made the Sacklers millions of dollars, but it was just the beginning.
This is an industry that's out of control. What they want to do is do what they want to do and not worry about what the law is.
The government ended up investigating the family in the 60s and then jump forward. They get off, they buy their way out of that, jump forward.
It's a white-collar case. You can't treat them like a drug cartel.
This pressure made them realize they needed a new way to make money.
So they went out and they said, what else is out there that we could put into our patented delivery system? And the answer was Oxy. They literally met with the head of the FDA at the time, after hours, at a hotel. He helped them draft their application, then rubber stamped it and pushed it through, and gave OxyContin the golden fucking ticket.
And OxyContin was the real moneymaker.
Once you've found the right doctor and have told him or her about your pain, don't be afraid to take what they give you. Often, it will be an opioid medication.
They were able to piggyback on their hydrocodone cotton delivery system, take the delivery mechanism, and all it is basically they grind up the powder and they create layers. So in theory, if you take the pill, you won't get 100 milligrams of Oxy at once. It'll, over 8 hours, dissolve into your body and you'll get the absorption.
Some patients may be afraid of taking opioids because they're perceived as too strong or addictive. But that is far from actual fact.
So what Purdue did is they took the same system, the cotton system, and they produced opioid for chronic and moderate pain.
I would never prescribe a narcotic for moderate pain. There's a pretty long history down here of pill abuse.
Less than 1% of people get addicted to OxyContin.
So they said, because of our patented delivery system, this drug is non-abusive, non-addictive. We have a great safety profile.
Less than 1% of patients taking opioids actually become addicted.
But that was a lie.
Less than 1%. And I know it may seem like they are pulling that number out of their arse, but they actually pulled it out of the letters to the editor section of the New England Journal of Medicine. Seriously.
But that 1% figure was repeated over and over again by the industry to claim that most people would not become addicted to opioids.
It wasn't peer-reviewed, and it was only about short-term use of opioids in hospitals, but it became the main source for that 1% claim.
Perhaps 1% or less of those people actually become addicted.
Fewer than 1/2 of 1%, less than 1% ever become addicted. Studies show there's virtually no risk of addiction.
That's not true. That somewhere between 10 and 20% of chronic pain patients have opioid use disorder or show signs of abuse.
But the gears of the marketing machine had already begun to turn.
You know you make me wanna sell OxyContin, if it's Contin, baby down now, sell it down now, we're Purdue now, you now, come on now, come on now, come on now, come on now.
We've gone through thousands of unsealed court documents, and what we found is an echo chamber between journalists, pain advocacy groups, and doctors.
They came to the conclusion that there was a national epidemic of untreated pain, and that the answer to that epidemic were opioids.
Doctors have a major concern when patients start taking opioids that these are drugs which are going to blur their minds. That they'll make them sleepy and vague, and that they'll look stoned all the time. Nothing could be further from the truth. When patients are in pain, being in pain blurs your mind.
How did OxyContin take over the marketplace? So originally Oxy was meant for people who were like terminally ill with cancer and were in severe pain, or somebody who's on the upper echelon of the pain threshold. And the goal of a company and a rep is to grow the market. And so when you go out, it's like, how do you grow the market? Well, we're gonna grow the patient demographic. We're gonna have to grow, we need the doctors to write more of this. So what they did with OxyContin was they went out and started, it got to a point where they were literally promoting it for people with migraines, and they were pumping these pain pills into all these practices.
Was this before or after it had been proven that it was highly addictive?
They knew it was highly addictive based off the study.
But despite knowing it was highly addictive, the FDA had given it full approval. So they unleashed the marketing reps.
He made it mandatory that we launch what he called an effective dose campaign.
And what is that?
It's a fancy way of basically saying let's make sure that the patient will come back and want more. Others might say, let's make sure we get the patients addicted.
Can you breathe? Can you hear me, honey? Just wake up.
You're preying on these people.
Yeah, because they're desperate. They'll try anything.
Just wake up.
They are approached by these drug reps who hand them labels that have been approved by the FDA, and they have to take it at face value. They have to believe the tests that were submitted by Purdue Pharma to the FDA for the approval process.
But we all know what's going to happen. We know, we've been doing this long enough. We know how it ends.
And that is?
It ends in addiction, withdrawal, pain, suffering, and even death.
And you didn't care about that?
And then you give a rep that, and you set them out in a marketplace, and you give them a $20,000 a month expense account, and you have them taking guys to dinner, drinking wine and eating steaks.
It's no different than a bribe.
No different from a bribe.
We're just calling it what it is. Instead of bribing doctors, we're calling it educational consulting, medical education program, fancy words. On the street, they just call it something different.
What do they call it on the street?
It's just a straight hustle. The only difference is they're in a suit and ties when they do their hustle. That's the only difference.
I would agree that all of that was concerted and that it was by design, and that the idea at the end of the day was just to push opium on the masses, to try and find a way to beef that market up.
If you don't produce a return on investment of at least 2 to 1 via prescriptions of substance, not only will you disappear from the Speakers Bureau, but your representative will be gone as well.
And you flat out told the doctor this?
Yes. 1, the more you write, the more you're going to earn. The more you increase the strength, the more you're going to earn. And doctor, if you don't like it, we walk away as friends. No big deal.
And they show in the label, hey, we're less addictive. This is a safe drug. We've got to stop pain. Anybody in your practice who has pain, we're on a mission to stop pain. And all of them started getting addicted.
But even if doctors started noticing that a lot more than 1% of their patients were getting addicted, Purdue had a ready answer. What if they're not?
The fourth concept that you have to manage pain is the concept of pseudo-addiction. Pseudo-addiction is a fairly new term. It only came in about 1990, but it's crucial. Pseudo-addiction is when a patient is looking like a drug addict because they're pursuing pain relief. So pseudo-addiction is relief-seeking behavior mistaken as drug addiction.
So the cure for pseudo-addiction, you were trained, is more opioids.
A higher dose, yes.
Did this concept of pseudo-addiction come with studies backing it up?
We had no studies. We did not have any studies. That's the thing that was kind of disturbing, was that we didn't have studies to present to the doctors.
If you're going to intentionally, knowingly break the law, your profits have to be so significant that when the FDA comes knocking and they hit you with a $425 million penalty, you're still smiling. You're sad in front of them, but when you walk out the door, you're smiling. You're smiling because you just made $1 billion worth of profit. And it's worth it to them. It's worth it.
And that's exactly what happened. In 2007, Purdue Pharma pled guilty to fraud and conspiracy charges. They paid $600 million in fines.
Good evening. The maker of a hugely popular painkiller has some pain of its own tonight. The company and its top officers will pay $634 million in fines for lying to the public.
Over the years, OxyContin made over $35 billion in profits. Millions were hopelessly addicted, hundreds of thousands died, and nobody went to prison. But they weren't just making money, they spent millions to whitewash the family name.
The Sackler name is on parts of the Met, the Louvre, the Museum of Natural History, the National Gallery in London, the Royal College of Art, an institute at Yale, a library at Oxford, and the Sackler Crossing at the Royal Botanic Gardens. Not bad.
But the best money they spent was on politicians, all the way up to the Food and Drug Administration.
The federal agency is now much cozier with the industry it is supposed to regulate. Pharmaceutical companies with lots of money and questionable practices. from lobbying.
Drug companies and the insurance companies have spent $4.5 billion on lobbying and campaign contributions.
To advertising.
Ask your doctor if Myrbetriq is right for you.
And price gouging.
Everybody's doing it. In capitalism, you try to get the highest price that you can for a product.
We like to put our faith in these governmental entities that are there to protect us. I was disheartened at the breakdown that happened at the governmental level, at the FDA.
Thanks to their connections at the FDA, they'd been able to push OxyContin to market in record time.
It was a deftly coordinated, planned event that took dozens of workers years of effort to succeed. The most demanding new drug approval package for any analgesic product ever submitted didn't languish at the agency. Unlike the years that other filings linger at FDA, this product was approved in 11 months, 14 days. Our previous best approval time for other products was measured in years, not months.
But they weren't satisfied.
In the world of medicine, the Food and Drug Administration has approved limited use of the painkiller OxyContin for children. FDA officials say there will be strict limits on the use of the drug because it's highly addictive.
Despite the huge fines, very little actually changed.
A former Purdue sales rep claims the drug maker downplayed the dangers of opioids even after pleading guilty to a felony charge of misbranding. Purdue's 2007 settlement with the Justice Department included more than $630 million in fines. But 24 states and more than 400 cities and counties are suing Purdue and its competitors, accusing them of fueling an opioid drug crisis that's killed more than 200,000 people.
They made it sound like it was a little bit of a witch hunt on the government's part.
But it wasn't a witch hunt. They knew exactly what was happening. And when their lies didn't work, they blamed the victims.
We have to hammer on the abusers in every way possible. They are the culprits and the problem. They are reckless criminals.
You know, I think it was this campaign by Purdue Pharma to really make the people who became addicted seem like the problem. That they were prone to it, that they were addicts, that they were less than.
We have new reporting this evening on America's opioid crisis. The major drug maker, Purdue Pharma, in talks to potentially settle more than 2,000 lawsuits.
From 2007 to 2010, they kept writing more and more prescriptions. But with a rising number of lawsuits, they knew they needed to make a change. Unfortunately, it was the worst decision they could have possibly made. They changed the formula of OxyContin to make it more difficult to abuse.
2010 and 11, they reformulated the oxys. OC went to OP. What happened to all of us using these on the street? So what we started to notice was, first of all, the price. From roughly 2001 to 8 or 9, the price of oxy was increasing right along with the opioid epidemic. But now when the reformulation came out, you could see like a quick, immediate rise on the street. All of a sudden, overnight, every dealer $5, $7, $10 more per pill. Why? Because it's a little bit harder to get.
And because it was a lot cheaper, a lot of people turned to heroin.
A strong warning from the CDC today. The United States is experiencing what it calls a dramatic rise in heroin-related death.
A heroin epidemic is sweeping the nation.
The Phoenix Rescue Mission's president, Jay Corey, says the fastest growing population here, heroin users.
It's a ready supply. It's accessible on the streets. It's affordable, and it's dangerous.
We are dealing with a rise in heroin deaths.
And while the drug has gotten stronger, it's also cheaper.
Drug overdose deaths are now the leading cause of injury death.
There were close to 50 envelopes in his apartment believed to contain heroin, according to law enforcement sources, along with more than 20 syringes. If he did overdose on heroin, Philip Seymour Hoffman's final hours reflect what U.S. officials say is a menacing tide.
An opiate is an opiate. I don't care which one it is. Every one of them will kill you.
After heroin came the rise of fentanyl. And fentanyl was even worse.
We're in a crisis where they don't even really have an answer.
I'll meet regular people, square Joes, on their way to work, and they'll stop, hang out with me, try this drug for the first time, and then leave their life.
A decade ago, heroin was the main killer. Now it's the powerful synthetic substance, fentanyl.
I mean, the fact that this isn't a main issue, on TV every night is insane to us. I've never seen anything like it. Literally, not leave from that moment on. They're just out here with us.
Is that what fentanyl does?
To some people, it's insane. I've never seen anything like it. No one has.
How has fentanyl transformed your home?
People are dying. A lot more people are dying.
And that's mirrored across the country, where fentanyl is the main cause of overdose deaths and the number one killer of adults under 50.
And it's in a lot of the drug supply, and people are doing it without knowing they're doing it.
With lawsuits piling up and judgments going against them, the Sacklers crafted a new plan. It was time to get out.
Acre of OxyContin will be able to settle legal claims tied to the opioid epidemic while shielding the owners of Purdue Pharma from future lawsuits. A federal appeals court approved a plan today where the Sackler family members would give up ownership of Purdue. They would also contribute $5.5 billion to $6 billion, $5.5 to $6 billion in cash over time. A chunk of that money would go to victims of the opioid crisis and their survivors. Purdue would also become a new company, and its profits would go to a fund to prevent and treat addiction.
But the vast majority of that money didn't go to the victims. It went to the government and the lawyers. And the Sackler family themselves made out like bandits.
Right? You have pretty much every state in the union suing Purdue Pharma. Half of the states initiated lawsuits against individual Sackler family members who were on the board of the company. And yet this whole thing is going to get resolved in a bankruptcy court in White Plains. And with this resolution that's pretty exotic. I mean, Purdue has declared bankruptcy, but the Sackler family has not. They took $10 billion out of the company before it declared bankruptcy.
Disbelief that they've been granted immunity to any civil litigation moving forward. Disbelief that this settlement will just be a drop in the bucket for them financially. It sounds like a huge settlement, $4.5 billion, but they get to pay it over 9 years. So in fact, it'll be less than the interest payments that they're making, or the interest they'll be making on their principal each year. So they'll be coming out with more money after the settlement than when they started. So it doesn't feel punitive on any level whatsoever. And ultimately, it goes into sort of everything that I've been feeling about the Sacklers through my entire research process into this crisis, which is that they always get away with it. They just always get away with it.